Guys, in today's video, I'll be teaching you all about the fish that nobody ever talks about in Hawaii. These fish are either just really rare, not as openly talked about, just overlooked by some of these other spear fishermen. I'll be sharing with you guys my own tips and tricks, where you can find these fish, and the size limits required for these fish. A lot of these fish in this video you may have never heard of before, so make sure to watch the full video so you can learn all about new types of fish. First fish up is the Aweoweo or glass eye. You can usually find this fish in caves right alongside menpachis, and when you're looking in the caves, make sure to look for the big eye, because the menpachis have a much smaller eye compared to the Aweoweo, so that's how you can differentiate between the two. The best way to cook this fish, I would say, is to fry it. So use some olive oil or some vegetable oil. Size limits for this fish, there is no size limit for Aweoweo, so you can shoot them at any size. Next up, we got the alaihi or striped squirrelfish. This fish is also another cave fish. You can see this in caves, but it's usually bigger than the menpachis and Aweoweos. You can get up to I would think around 6 pounds. There is no size limit for this fish. A tip to find this fish, just make sure to look in the caves, drop down slowly into the caves, and just drop down right outside of the caves. Move in slowly so you don't scare away the fish, and then you'll see it. Just line up and shoot them. The best way to cook this fish, this is also another good fish that's fried. The Nebeta or black-side razorfish. This fish is a deeper fish, and this fish is usually caught bottom fishing, but some people can catch them spearfishing because they'll sometimes come in shallower. This is a smaller fish. I would recommend, if you're trying to catch this fish, just drop down to the bottom, and if you see him around, scratch a little bit and he'll probably come in. This fish is really good fried. If you're frying this fish, make sure to keep its scales on because they'll crunch up and it'll give it a nice crispy layer, just adding to the flavor of the fish. Ta'ape or blue striped snapper. This fish is an invasive fish in Hawaii, so if you see it, make sure to take it off the reef. This fish is best cooked fried, but I wouldn't recommend eating this fish just because of the risk factor of ciguatera. Make sure to drop down to the bottom, wait, scratch it a little bit, and it should come right in. You can also shoot this fish on a 3-prong since it's not too big. Toao or black-tailed snapper. This is another invasive fish, so make sure to shoot it. I would recommend frying this fish up. It's really good, but you can do a lot of different recipes with this guy. It's a pretty good tasting fish. A tip to shoot this fish, I see him a lot around caves, so if you just go by a cave, you could see a ta'ape swimming back and forth. Just make sure to line up on him, wait for the good shot, and just take the shot. Nai or orange bond surgeonfish. This fish is a very beginner fish. This was like the first decent sized fish I shot. This fish, it's not the best tasting fish in the world, I'll say that, so if you're gonna cook it up, I guess you could grill it or fry it. A tip for this fish, just drop down to the bottom. It's usually just on the point of reef, and then there's sandy areas, and it's just swimming right in between those usually. I'll just say drop down to the bottom, line up, and just take your shot. Umaumalei or orange spined unicorn fish. This fish is pretty good grilled. It's another, I would say, beginner fish. It's a bit easier to shoot than its older brother, the Kala. It doesn't get too big, so there's no size limits required for this guy. Tip for shooting this fish is just go down to the bottom, scratch a little bit, and it should come right in. Hoggy or black triggerfish. This fish, I would say, is another beginner fish. You usually find this fish in mid-water columns, and they're usually in huge schools. Bomb drop down, you can usually just take a shot because they're not too scared of you. The best way to cook this fish up, I would say, grill it. Opelu Kala or sleek unicorn fish. This fish is usually found in big schools. This guy gets pretty big. I heard he gets up to about 10 pounds. A good tip for this fish, I would say if you can go a little bit deeper, they usually get bigger the size. So when you're shallower, the Opelu Kalas are usually small. The best way to cook this guy up is another grilled fish. We got a really interesting fish, which is the knife jaw. These fish get pretty big. State record fish was 20 pounds. This fish is really good. Just pan sear in some butter, some garlic. A tip for this guy, I would say you need to be in a definitely more advanced spot, off the grid type of spot where not very many people dive, and that's where you're gonna find this guy. When you see it in the water, it swims way different compared to all the other fish, so you'll be able to tell when you see one. Just a big black fish with some white spots on it. Hog fish or table boss. This fish is usually on its own. They're not usually in schools. It's usually just down on the bottom of sandy, like dead reef areas, just chewing on the whatever they eat, just chewing up the sand or whatever. Lie or leatherback. This is one of my personal favorite fish to shoot. They respond well to flasher, so if you throw in a flasher and you see one of these guys, it'll usually come straight in. But my tip for you guys is if you're throwing your flasher, make sure to not throw it too close to the lie, because if you throw it too close to the lie, the splash from the flasher will scare away the lie. So just throw it maybe like 10 yards away from the lie. Make sure it's facing the direction you throw it, and they'll usually come right in. The best way to cook this guy up is really good. Sashimi or try and make a poke bowl out of this guy. Moe or six-fingered thread fin. This fish is usually spotted in shallower waters, and the waters usually around this fish is a bit wavy. So if you're trying to find the moes, they're usually in wavy and sandy areas, and they'll usually be hanging out in schools. The best way to cook up this fish, I've never personally caught one of these, to be honest, but I would say pan fry it in some butter. That's always a good way to go. Ava or milkfish. I've shot two of these fish before. This is a really good tasting fish. I would say the best way to cook up this fish is to make wontons with this fish. So you can scoop out the meat, put it in a bowl, look up a wonton recipe. A tip for shooting this guy, I've shot my avas in dirtier water because they'll clump closer to you. If you see an ava in ultra crystal clear water, it will be really wary of coming in close, but if you can spot some in dirtier water, they're not as scared. So I would say dirtier water and try and shoot it in the spine or gill shot, because if you don't, they'll tear off really easily since the meat is super soft. Alright guys, now we're on the Kaku or great barracuda. This fish, I've never shot one of these fish, but I know they have worms, and I've seen one in the water that was close to 100 pounds. It was massive. A tip for shooting this fish, I would say the deeper you go, the better, and they respond really well to flashers. Make sure you have a spear gun with a reel on if you're gonna try and shoot one of these guys, and I would make sure you have gloves on too, because you probably wouldn't want to get your fingers bitten off by their razor sharp teeth. I don't cook up this fish because they have worms inside of it, but if you were gonna cook it up, I would suggest maybe grilling it so you can try and kill all the stuff inside of it. Wahanui or rusty jobfish. This fish has ciguatera, but if you want to try catch one, I would suggest going a bit deeper out, going down to the bottom, grunting, throwing up some sand, and they'll come right in. This fish is the uku's little brother. It's a smaller red jobfish. If you're gonna eat it, I would also suggest grilling it just to kill anything that's inside of it. Hey guys, now we got the pow pow or golden trevally. This fish is usually found around big coral structures, and the coral heads are usually dead. This fish can get pretty big. I know people have caught pow pow that were over 10 pounds. The best way to cook up this fish, they're really good sashimi. Hey guys, now we got one of my personal favorite fishes, which is the Kagami or African pompano. This fish is so beautiful. It's probably the prettiest fish you'll ever see in the ocean. It looks like an alua, but has long, like shiny streamers on it. I would suggest if you're gonna see this fish, I would throw a flasher. It'll probably come right in. The trevallies usually like those, or you can go down to the bottom, scratch and grunt, and it'll come right over. If you're gonna cook this fish up, I would suggest pan frying it in some butter. Now we got the Nohu or Titan scorpion fish. This is a really rare fish. It looks like it's just like a poisonous rockfish, so make sure not to touch any of its spikes on your hands. It's gonna get venom into your system, which is not good, and you should probably go see a doctor. The best way to cook up this fish, honestly, you could try any recipe with this fish. I heard it tastes like lobster. To find this fish, it's usually in like harder to reach places, usually hiding right by rock. It almost looks like the rocks, but I would just say if you're in like a rarer place that's hard to get to, just be looking up and down the whole beach when you get there, and you maybe be able to spot one of these guys. And finally, we got the Tako or octopus. This isn't technically a fish, but it's hunted so much here in Hawaii that I'm just gonna consider it a fish. For the Tako, you want to make sure that it's 1 pound if you're gonna keep it. If your fist is the size of its head, it should be around 1 pound. To cook up the Tako, you gotta make sure to rinse it really well, get out all of the ink, make sure to clean off the head. Some people have whole washing machines just meant for cleaning their octopuses. If you're gonna cook this guy up, I would suggest making taco poke or popcorn taco.